Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay. Hey guys, did subscribe, preemptive like Louis the Ninth, the Crusader King, the Cajun cutthroat voice crack. So this is I'm gonna be reading a lot here, okay, which I have no problem with. But there's gonna be a lot of French terms, names, which I am going to butcher beyond belief. I'm gonna try my best, but I know nothing about Louis the Ninth, so I'm excited to learn. Let's go, guys. Oh, wait. He seemed taller than all his men, higher from his shoulders and upward than any of them, a golden great helm on his head, a sword of Germany in his hand. There never was seen such a beautiful knight. Saint Louis at the battle of Almontserrat. Description by Jean de Joinville. Son of French King Louis VIII. The Lion, and of Queen Blanche of Castile, Louis IX was born in the castle of Poissy on April the 25th, 1214. A few weeks before the great victory of the French troops over those of the Holy Roman Empire in England at Boivin, the ninth king of the House of Capet, Louis XII, was sacred at Reims. Is sacred the right way there? Sacred? Sacred at Reims a few days only after the burial of his father. Blanche of Castile, regent of the kingdom, did it this way to cut short the desire of rebellion of his great vassals. Blanche was for Louis a tender and thoughtful mother. She cared to give him a good education and instilled the principles of pious faith into him. All his life, the king would spend several hours praying every day. Considered adult in 1234, Louis married Margaret of Provence. Blanche firstly found her far too beautiful. Interesting. But she quickly felt reassured thanks to great devoutness of the young married couple and their seriousness in their tasks. Impregnated with the ideas of Saint Francis of Assisi, Louis regarded justice as his first duty. Jean de Joinville told it occurred many times in summer after Mass that he went to the woods of Vincennes, and leant his back against an oak tree and had us sat around him. Anyone who was in trouble came to talk to him without being prevented from speaking by a bailiff or someone else. Is that where we get the term bailiff from? Beyond the quite well-known image of Louis IX, the king implemented large reforms which fundamentally modernized French law. He definitely forbade the trials by ordeal, judicial duels with some challenges. From then on, none shall be deprived from his rights if he is not convicted of some faults, and if there is no trial, he wrote. Pretty revolutionary in the 13th century. The Capetian king also established the supplicatio, the right to appeal against a decision to the royal court, which then became stronger than the courts of justice of the nobles. So clearly, he is a revolutionary leader in the ways he spread a more a fair justice system. No class was above the law. We know that Enguerrand, the fourth of Poissy, Lord of Montmirail, was jailed and condemned with a heavy fine because he had 3 boys hanged as they had inappropriately hunted on his lands. Yet the Capetian was very harsh, and those who did not respect the principles of the church notably forbidding the practice of usury and forcing Jews to convert. To improve the growth of cities, To improve the growth of cities and trade, Louis IX issued silver money, the tournesol, which was legal tender in all his kingdoms, contrary to lords' monies. Guys, again, I know I'm butchering the words, but if I apologize every time I say a French word, we'd be here for hours. Very nice coins. The Builder King, he ordered the creation of many hospitals, religious edifices, as well as castles in the newly taken provinces to the royal domain. He also contributed to the development of the very influent University of Paris with the construction of the College of Sorbonne. Ooh, look at that. I would love to go back in time and just be a ghost looking at ancient... I don't know if I'd call the 1200s ancient. But people back then without modern equipment constructing buildings would be so cool. Louis liked controlling himself the progresses of constructions which were often quick and evidence of good economic health of the country. During his reign, many cathedrals, the French style, later called Gothic style, are... Ooh, Gothic is a French style. Another thing I learned. Were also erected and impressed the Western world. During his reign, In 1242, Alphonse, Count of Poitiers, brother of the king, had to face a rebellion of Poitou's barons? Poitou? English King Henry III, who had stirred up the rebellion, landed with his army in Saintonge, willing to take back the English provinces conquered by Philip II of France. The negotiations launched by Louis failed. Consequently, the Capetian gathered the royal army and marched to the enemy. The shock occurred over the bridge of Taillebourg on the Charente River. As the Night King, Louis charged at the head of his heavy cavalry and routed the Anglo-Poitevin army. The idea of like the leaders of countries going into war, not just to view from a distance, but to actually go in with the army, is a crazy, very foreign idea, is alien these days, obviously. I wonder when that stopped. The Battle of Taillebourg marked the total victory of France over England in what is sometimes called the First 100 Years' War. The Treaty of Paris in 1259. There are so many treaties of Paris. In 1259, allowed Louis IX to confirm all the conquests of Philip II, Augustus, Normandy, Touraine, and Anjou, and to add Saintonge to the north of the Charente River too. The King of England only kept Guyenne and had to swear allegiance to the French king, his feudal suzerain, thus becoming his vassal as Duke of Aquitaine. Uh-oh. With the Treaty of Corbeil, Louis IX renounced to his claims over Catalonia and was given in exchange Languedoc by James I of Aragon. The French crown then stretched out his influence continuously from the English Channel to the Mediterranean. Okay, so Brittany's still not in there, and then this area. The Christian world hailed to these fair treaties. Louis IX, then wise king at the head of the most powerful army of the West, benefited from a huge prestige. An impressive feat, his arbitration was required by foreign powers, notably in the case of inheritance conflicts. Sure, yeah. I can imagine getting new areas is going to make a lot of people mine. Is that mine? The King of France only left his neutrality when the Papal States were threatened of an invasion by Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. Then Louis offered his protection to Pope Innocent IV, and the Imperial Army turned back to avoid a fight against the powerful French army. Since the sack of Constantinople in 1204, the Byzantine Empire suffered from heavy military and financial problems. Is this the sack of Constantinople by one of the Crusades? Kind of like the Peasant Crusade, I think it might have been. Desperate to find funding, Baldwin II of Constantinople sold precious Christian reliquaries. Is that the Baldwin that fought Saladin? After a long inquiry to check its authenticity, the crown of thorns was acquired by the French king for the huge sum of 135,000 livres tournois. So, like, they're thinking that's the legitimate crown that Christ wore, Jesus. It would be followed by 22 other reliquaries, including a piece of the true cross, the holy blood, the image of Edessa, and the point of the holy lance. I'm assuming these are forgeries and aren't the real things. I mean, it is like 1,200 years later, and I mean, how would the people, even at the time after Jesus died, get their hands on it? It was under Roman control. Maybe it's real, I don't know. These are put in a sumptuous decor, the Sainte-Chapelle of Paris, built specifically for this purpose on the Ile de la Cite. Beautiful churches. The French capital became equal to Rome for its prestige and its holiness. From then on, the Capetian dynasty was seen as the spearhead of the Christian world. So this is the time where, you know, the Pope's not all that anymore. Obviously, he's got to have a lot of power still, but it seems like this is the time where finally, since the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, that the territories previously in the Western Roman Empire, like France, are becoming serious powers. This glory shone over the entire Kingdom of France, the wealthiest and the most populated of the European countries. As well as the most developed in the intellectual and artistic domains. Okay. The legacy of the Capetian Golden Age was to be very important in the construction of the French national sentiment. So Louis IX seems to be the big start of France being a serious power. Is that fair to say, guys? In December 1244, Louis fell seriously ill on the brink of death. He swore to join the crusade if he recovered. He did recover and was true to his word. Indeed, Jerusalem fell into the hands of the Muslims the same year. Then the Seventh Crusade, exclusively French. Seven? There were seven? Like the First Crusade, entered into preparation. In August 1248, a fleet cast off from the harbors of Marseille and Aigues-Mortes, on board 3,000 knights and 12,000 infantry. Along with his brothers Alphonse, Count of Poitiers, Robert I, Count of Artois, and Charles of Anjou, Louis IX made the bold choice to invade Egypt, heart of the power of Islam. Egypt was, I didn't know that, was the heart of Islam at the time. June 1249, the Crusaders landed before Damietta and swept away Egyptian defenses. The French took the port city and set free many Christian prisoners jailed in the bowels of the fortress. You know, I always saw these early depictions of knights at the time, and they look like they're like too well fit. You know, like the armor is so well fitted to their bodies that it almost seems like it couldn't be real. But I recently saw, maybe like a month ago, a video of a knight at the time being dressed in like traditional period armor, and it did look pretty darn well fit and maneuverable. So maybe these aren't that far off. Stay hydrated, guys. These first successes enticed the Capetian to carry on his advance south of Cairo. In January 1250, the Crusaders were blocked by the fortress of Al-Mansura, built near one tributary of the Nile, skillfully defended by General Bakr ad-Din. February 8th, the French vanguard, led by the fiery Robert, Count of Artois, managed to cross the river on a narrow gap. Disobeying the king, Robert and his men rushed to Al-Mansura, whose gates were purposely let open. Then they were trapped in the narrow by-streets and slaughtered to the last one by one. One by the Mamluk garrison of General Baibars, named Crossbowmen. A few hours later, the rest of the Crusader army also crossed the river. Saracens, reinforced by the excellent Mamluk mounted archers, then threw a rain of arrows and flood of Greek fire, causing panic in Christian ranks. Seeing his men at the brink of collapse, Louis gathered his knights and launched a strong charge towards the swirling mass of Mamluks. In hand-to-hand combat, the French, as the Saracens called them, gained back their superiority and cut to pieces their enemies. Every time in the thick of combat, ceaselessly, haranguing his men. I feel like I should know how to pronounce that. Louis IX was greater on his own than the battle. Greater on his own than the battle. Joinville Rhode. I love how I'm like trying to pronounce like French names and words in a kind of French way, even though it's very likely just wrong. So I'm sure to many French speakers, it probably sounds very stupid, maybe funny. So that's fine. On the night of this memorable day, the defeated Egyptian army retreated. Yet because of the impetuousness of Robert, Count of Artois, what should have been a triumph for Louis IX was no more than a costly victory. Pyrrhic victory? In the following days, a typhus epidemic broke out among the victors and prevented them from carrying on the offensive. Typhus is a group of bacterial infection, either headache or muscle. There are two main types. Spread by body lice, spread by fleas. Okay. The Frankish column was no more than the shadow of itself, and the king had to accept a difficult retreat to Damietta. On April 6th, the Crusaders were encircled by Baibars and men in the village of Frank. Berisker, after heroic defense, Louis IX was captured by the enemy. For the first time, a king of France was the object of a ransom, threatened to death on many occasions. Louis impressed Muslims and Christians with his stoicism. The ransom was quickly prepared by the courageous Margaret of Provence, although she was about to give birth, who forced rich Templars to lend money. Once set free, Louis stopped over at the Crusader states, which were quite weakened by never-ending internal conflicts. As soon as he arrived, the King of France was immediately named the chief of Eastern Christians and strongly reorganized the defense of Acre, Jaffa, Caesarea Sidon. From then on, well aware of the political subtleties of the Levant, he managed to revive the internal tensions of the Muslim world between the House of Damascus and the House of Cairo. Warred his former gaolers, then covered him with splendid presence and liberated all his companions taken at Farisker. Louis also managed to keep at bay the dreaded sect of assassins, whose great master, the Old Man of the Mountain, sounds familiar, was fascinated with the charisma and unwavering faith of the Capetian. The first Western king with a global Genghis Khan? Diplomatic vision, the King of France sent an embassy to Mongol Khans, enemies of Islam and tolerant with Christians. Really? He was tolerant with Christians? However, he could not take personally advantage of these first promising contacts. The death of his mother forced him to come back to France in 1254. The obscure but huge work realized by the Capetian during his presence in the Crusader states allowed their last true recovery. In 1261, Baibars, who had become sultans of Egypt. Baibars, who had become sultan. Right, Baibars was a guy. I keep thinking it's a group. Who had become sultan of Egypt, launched a great offensive against these Frankish overseas territories who had fallen back into anarchy since Louis' departure. Against the advice of his counselors, the King of France, despite his declining health, decided to take the cross again. Thanks to the fleet of Charles of Anjou, who became Charles I of Naples in the meantime, Louis and his army landed in Tunis. On July 24, 1270, Carthage was taken by the Crusaders and then besieged Tunis, which was defended by Muhammad I al-Mustansir. Yet operations were made very difficult because of the scorching heat. Attackers and defenders were dying of dysentery. The amount of people in history that must have died of dysentery has to be astronomically high. Jean Tristan, son of the king, died of August 4th. Louis fell sick from dysentery too and died August 25th. Rip. In his last breath, he pronounced the name Jerusalem. His young son Philip succeeded him, yet it was the experienced Charles of Anjou who negotiated the end of the siege against a huge indemnity and ended the crusade shortly after. The remnants of Louis IX were placed in the Basilica of Saint Denis after a long journey through Sicily, Italy, and France. Already considered a saint in his lifetime, the Capetian from then on was the object of a true veneration. His reliquaries were progressively taken out of his tomb and scattered in the entire Christian world. Many French prelates asked for his canonization as soon as 1272, many times interrupted. The inquiry of the Holy See lasted over 25 years. What is this here? For obvious political reasons, King Philip IV, the fair, great son of Louis IX, put pressure on the papacy to speed up the procedure. August 11, 1297, giving to the crown of France an unmatched prestige and a holy aura, Pope Boniface VIII announced the canonization of Louis IX under the name of Saint Louis of France. Very well done video. Part of me thinks I maybe should have not read out loud and just like read in silence and then spoken up about the things I wanted to talk about. But I learned a lot about a historical figure I knew nothing about before. And he seemed like a very revolutionary king, both domestically and outside of the country. And he seems to be in a place where both the Eastern Mediterranean, long held by European powers, is finally doomed to Arab control. Doomed to Arab control. That sounds not like how I want to say it. For them, doomed to Arab control, right? But for Arabs, it's a good thing that they took it. And in a time where France was becoming a legitimate force, seemingly the first powerful force to be reckoned with entity post-Western Roman collapse in Europe. Not counting the Byzantines, because they're still technically Roman. Very good video. I do sort of regret the way I watched it, though. Just reading everything out loud. I think I should have read in silent and then just spoke up about the things I wanted to speak up about. So I do kind of regret that. But it's a great video. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. And I hope I'll see you guys next time. Bye.